Hello, welcome to another video. My name's Cassidy. I host the Information Addicts podcast, but today I am in the desert doing another walk and talk. If I'm honest with you all, I hate these videos. I find them wildly uncomfortable to make. It's just outside of my comfort zone and outside of my regular structure. But after talking with a lot of people, I found that there's many of you guys who really resonate with them and are enjoying them. So I've decided to keep pushing into it, embracing it, and learning to make it a little bit more comfortable. And even if it doesn't ever become comfortable, just learning from what I can from the uncomfortability and hopefully hoping you get something from it. So I'm going to keep doing them, at least for now. And I was going to release a monologue video to continue talking about truth and the way we operate in those things. But I've decided to do this instead because I watched a film this weekend with a group of friends, and it really left me pondering and processing things. And I figured, what better way to process it all than out in the desert talking to my iPhone. So this weekend I watched Would You Be My Neighbor, which is the documentary about Mr. Rogers. And for those of you who don't know who Mr. Rogers is, he was a American children's entertainer, basically. He worked on public television and had a TV show with like puppets and like low production quality that, you know, dealt with issues and spoke to children. And he kind of became a staple and an icon within like broader culture. And I remember watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood when I was younger. I wasn't obsessed with it, but I definitely remember watching PBS and seeing it on and remembering the puppets and the train and the colorful sweaters. And I think for most people in America, even if you didn't watch his show, you had a sense of who he was. You knew you knew him in sort of the icon that he became and what he represented in sort of this wholesome, like childlike wonder and quietness that he represented. And after watching the video or the film, I was really emotional, and I think it was for a lot of reasons. And I'm just going to try breaking down those right now. So the first, I think, was the way that he created. He was a children's TV host for some like program on a public access channel, but he had such intentionality with the way that he created and what he wanted to make. He felt a responsibility to not just continued to add to the entertainment culture that was already there, but create something that mattered and that really addressed the things that kids were going through and how they were processing all of their own little world. And he did that in a way that broke a lot of the molds of what was done in the time. He really embraced the art of subtlety and silence and slow pacing and not trying to grab people with flashy, loud movement or cartoons, but took the time to really just address them where they are in a way that he knew how. And I think even though I've never wanted to work in the mode of like children's media or entertainment, there's something about the way that he created that resonated with what I've always wanted to emulate in creation, of being willing to slow things down and appreciate the art of subtlety, and to really get at what I'm creating and why I'm creating it, and being intentional about the messaging and the things that I'm actually saying and putting out into the world. And I think sometimes those things are lost in what we see created today. We kind of live in this clickbait, constant information culture, and everybody's trying to compete with everybody else, and they're using these tricks to pull people in and keep people entertained, and always on this high of excitement. And it works. It obviously works to an extent, but I think what was really beautiful to watch is to see that there is this other side of the coin too, where you can take the subtlety and the beauty in which embodies all of that and still make something that people resonate with and stands the test of time. I think the second thing that really resonated with me was the way that he spoke to his audience. He's making things for children, yet he never acted as if he was, in a sense. He didn't treat children like they were dumb and they couldn't understand what was going on. He spoke to them on a serious level and acted as if they could understand and comprehend some of these deep issues that we're all facing. And of course, he did it in a way that was more deeply resonating with children. But there was still this breaking of categories where he was willing to address the things that were actually going in their lives and talk about the things that were often the things nobody wanted to talk about. I think there's often this thing within ourselves where we can look at people who don't get what we're doing or who are consuming the things we're creating as stupid. And so you have to really spell things out. But I think what he showed is that, there is some beauty to treating people as if they are capable of understanding and aren't that they aren't just needing to be spoon-fed simplicity. And he does all of this in this simple, downplayed way, but there's a depth underneath it that I think transcends the way that he did those things. So I think for me, as I create content and I keep interacting with others and trying to see the way he did it all, it's really inspiring. And I think it often helps me realize that, just because there are certain things that aren't being done right now in entertainment and the way that we're creating doesn't mean that it can't work. It may be more difficult and it may be harder to really get on the map to set yourself apart and prove that it could work. But, I think there is a way to really embrace those things and find a way to put that back into an entertainment world. And I think the last thing that really resonated with me about the film and just the way that he lived his life is seeing how different Mr. Rogers was in the space of entertainment. He definitely didn't fit the mold of what, you think someone should be. And he had this wholesome sort of demeanor that was easy to poke fun of or dismiss as something fake or not real. And I'll be honest, even watching the film, there are those questions of like, is this real? Is there something being hidden? Is there something about the true picture that's not quite as pretty and neat? And I'm certain that the true picture was more complicated and messy than what was portrayed. You just really hope that that picture is not so distorted when you really get to real life. think there's been a lot of uncovering of behavior and misuse of power on a whole slew of fields, whether it's just entertainment or in religion or in, academia. And I think this narrative and this continual spotlight of the misconduct and bringing that to light begins to have this narrative where we think that that's all there is. And I think there's a lot of beauty and goodness in unveiling those things and giving people a space to speak out what's happening and find a way to resolve that. But I also think that there's, and I speak for myself, there's a bit of all of that has left me with a level of distrust in people and the idea that there can be people who want to put more good out into the world than evil to get to those places of power and those places of influence and find success in what they do. And so when I see someone like Mr. Rogers and what his mission was and his ethos was, and be able to find that success, and from what it seems to truly have had this care for children and making sure they felt like they had a place in the world, and whatever criticisms you have about the way that he taught, the way that he could put some good into the world and create something good, it's really inspiring. And it leaves me with the question of, well, how do we cultivate that more? How do we continue to grow that in ourselves, and how do we recognize that in others? And how do we weed out between those two things and discern the people we can trust and the people we shouldn't? And how do we live our lives not being stuck in fear that everybody's out to get us and everything's building up to something that's ultimately leading to destruction? I mean, there's a lot of misrepresentation in the world by others, but also by ourselves. I think it's easy to put on a mask and a face and try to be this better version, this squeaky clean version of yourself. And I think it there's a balance, but in some ways to always try to have it all together, have all the right answers, be so structured and controlled does a disservice to the actual understanding of the world we live in and how we operate within that. And so how do we create spaces where people can say that they're wrong, whether in ideas or in moral choices? And how do we find ways to give people support to flee from the things that are going to be destructive and harmful, and find a place to work through those things? And how do we give people a place to admit their wrongs and do that honestly? I think there's a big part of what I'm interested in is honest conversation and having a place to let people speak what they want and express what they're struggling with and going through, and allowing them for a place to sometimes say the wrong thing, and sometimes that's best to be done behind closed doors with people you trust, and people have the best for you and make you the best. But I think there's a place too where some of that needs to be happening in the public square. And it needs to be modeled because we don't know how to do that well. And I think there's a lot of people so scared to even say anything because they might say the wrong thing or be painted in a wrong way. And it leaves us debilitated and unable to really operate in this in a healthy way. So I think for me, that's something that I want to keep in mind, and what I'm creating, what I'm doing is like, how do we create that space for open conversation? How do we have honest conversations and test the assumptions of our own beliefs, and work with others to test the assumption of theirs? And it's not in a way to win or lose, but to come together and get closer to truth, and how to really operate in that in a way that's healthy and productive. I don't have the answers to that. And I think as I continue to create and continue to pour into this project and other projects that I do, it's always going to be a testing and a trying of how to do these things, and how to really get to better conversations in a way to work together to bridge those things. And so I'm excited for those of you who are long and actually listening to be part of that and join in that conversation. I've had lovely conversations with people who have connected me through the podcast outside and private, and I'm excited to, here in the near future, be able to actually record some of those conversations and release them for the public, and see how that all manifests. But I'm excited to have you guys around on this experiment, and hopefully more good than bad comes from it. So I think that's really what we're all trying to do, is have more good come from the things we do than negativity. And it's a tricky balance to find sometimes, because I think even the best intentions can lead to consequences that were never meant to be. So I'm going to keep walking with caution and taking the steps and trying to adjust and figure out how to do this all better. And yeah, I'm glad to have you all with me. All right, I think that's it. I'm going to wrap it up. But again, thank you so much. Next week will most likely be a monologue video, and then hopefully some conversations. I definitely got a couple that are in the works on the calendar, and I'm really excited to talk about them, talk with those people and share the conversations we have. But yeah, if you want to keep up to date, definitely subscribe. I try to do a video every week. So far, so good. And yeah, I'm excited for the things that are coming down, because I see good things ahead. All right, bye.